In this module, we're going to talk about dairy products, including milk and cheese. The objectives for this module are: identify, store, and cook a variety of milk and milk-based products, describe basic cheese making process, classify and the characteristics of the 5 categories of fine cheeses: fresh or unripened, soft, semi-soft, firm, and hard. Describe the characteristics of goat milk cheeses, and identify, store, and serve fine cheeses. Milk and milk products provide texture, flavor, color, and nutritional value for cooked and baked items. Whole milk contains approximately 88% water, 3.5% milk fat, and 8.5% milk solids. So it is said that whole milk is roughly around 4% milk fat. Milk is graded based on bacterial count. The higher the bacterial count, the lower the grade. Grade A milk is the lowest bacterial count. 90% of all commercial milk production falls in this category, and it must be pasteurized before retail. Grade B milk is only available to be used in the production of butter, cheese, and other manufactured goods. And grade C milk is the highest bacterial count and can only be used in manufacturing where cooking is required. Pasteurization is the process of heating milk to a sufficiently high temperature for a sufficient length of time to destroy pathogenic bacteria. Ultra-pasteurization is raw milk is heated to 280 degrees for approximately 4 to 5 seconds. High-temperature pasteurization, where raw milk is heated to 161 degrees for 15 seconds and then rapidly cooled. Low-temperature pasteurization, raw milk is heated to 145 degrees for 30 minutes and then rapidly cooled. And then raw products have not been heat treated to kill off any harmful bacteria, so raw products have a shorter shelf life and limited usage. Homogenization is the process in which the fat globules in whole milk are reduced in size and permanently dispersed throughout the liquid. You can see from the diagram where the larger fat globules will pass through a restrictor of some kind and then into a sieve, which forces the globules into smaller and smaller pieces. This allows for the fat to stay distributed throughout the liquid of the milk. Milk percentages are based on the percent of milk fat in the milk itself. Skim milk is 0 to 0.5%. 1% milk is obviously 1% to 1.5% milk. 2% milk falls between 2 and 2.5%, and whole milk is anywhere from 3.5 to 4.5% milk fat. Concentrated milk products are some of the favorites in pies and cakes. Evaporated milk is 60% of the water is removed. The biggest misconception about evaporated milk is that it is the same as sweetened condensed milk. It is not, because sweetened condensed milk is evaporated milk with 40 to 45% sugar added to it, so it is a sweetened milk. And then dry milk powder, virtually all the water has been removed, and you can use this and rehydrate it to make milk, or use it in baking products whenever water is not needed. Just like milk, cream percentages are based on the percent of milk fat. Half and half is roughly between 10 and 18% milk fat. It's said to be half and half because it's half cream, half milk. Light cream is between 18 and 30%, and this is used for coffee creamers. Heavy cream, also called whipping cream, is between 30 and 36%. And then heavy whipping cream, also called heavy cream, is anywhere greater than 36%. Usually you'll see it in the grocery store to between around 40%. Cultured milk products are useful for providing things such as body texture and also tang and acidicness to a product. One of the most common is buttermilk. Buttermilk has a tart milk texture with thick cream texture also. It has the best of the both worlds of milk and a cream sort of in between. And it can also be low fat. This mixture has something called Streptococcus lactis added to it, which is a bacteria specific to buttermilk that allows for the milk to turn a little more acidic, giving us that unusual taste. Along the same lines is sour cream. It's a white, tangy gel used as a condiment. The same culture is added to pasteurize, homogenize light cream in order to get the sour cream. Creme fraiche is a thinner and richer than sour cream, but the same culture is added to heavy cream in order to get this. And then yogurt, thick, tart, custard-like product cultured with Lactobacillus bulgaricus and Streptococcus thermophilus. It can be made with whole or low-fat or skim milks. It comes in a regular or Greek yogurt, which has had a bit of the water removed from it and gives nice body and nice tang to cultured products. Butter is probably one of the most common of all the milk products that we use on a daily basis. USDA grade AA butter is the most often available to consumers. It's made from sweet cream with excellent flavor and texture and color, and it meets or exceeds the highest quality standards. Look for the shield when buying butter. You want to make sure that it is USDA certified grade A butter. Also, there is a difference between different kinds of butters, which we'll talk about shortly. Approximately 85% of butter sold to consumers in the U.S. is officially graded. Over 30 federal butter graders work across the United States evaluating butter samples for flavor, color, texture, and saltiness. And they use as many 200 samples weekly. Could you imagine eating that much butter? Butter is made by churning milk or cream until it's semi-solid and prepared for buttermilk, and it must be at least 80% butter fat to be called butter. There are types of butter, including salted butter, unsalted butter, whipped butter, and clarified butter. Depending on the usage, you might use salted butter in a baked item in order to add a little salt to your baked item. Most chefs tend to prefer unsalted butter because they can control the amount of salt that they add into the final dish. Whipped butter is good for spreading and gives a little more volume. And clarified butter actually makes the butter resistant to higher heat, so you can use it for sautéing. The flavor butter adds to a sauce or breads or pastries is unequaled. Butter contains at least 80% milk fat, not more than 16% water, and 2 to 4% milk solids. It may or may not contain added salt. Butter is firm when chilled and soft at room temperature. It melts into a liquid at approximately 93 degrees Fahrenheit or 33 degrees Celsius and reaches the smoke point at 260 degrees Fahrenheit or 127 degrees Celsius unless it is clarified, in which case that smoke point is going to be much higher. When you're storing butter, use fresh butter for best results. Check the best if used by date or the used by date on the carton. Store at 40 degrees Fahrenheit or lower in the refrigerator, in the coldest area of your refrigerator. You can store butter in what's called a butter bell or a butter container or a butter crock on the stove or on the countertop. You just want to make sure that it is tightly sealed so no outside aromas or anything like that can get into it. Remember, it is a dairy product. Use a resealable bag and keep it away from any strong smelling foods. Butter can absorb these smells and cause it to taste like them. Freezing any butter you don't want to use in a month is a good way of preserving it. Properly wrapping and stored frozen butter can keep between 6 and 9 months in the freezer. Although government grading is not mandatory for butter, most processors submit their butter for testing. The USDA label on the package assures that the buyer that the butter meets federal standards for the grade it indicated. USDA grade AA is butter of superior quality with a fresh, sweet flavor and aroma, a smooth and creamy texture, and good spreadability. Grade A butter is butter of very good quality with a pleasing flavor and a fairly smooth texture. And grade B butter meets the standard quality, made for sour cream, has an acceptable flavor, but lacks the flavor, texture, and body of grades AA and A. Grade B is most often used in industrial food manufacturing.
Butter making begins with a tanker truck delivery to the dairy, 30,000 liters of raw cow's milk. Workers test it for consistent color and odor before unloading it through vacuum-pumped hoses. They pump the raw milk into a machine called a separator. The separator spins, dividing the raw milk's fat from the rest of the liquid. The fat is called buttercream, and the rest is skim milk. The essential ingredient in butter is the buttercream. It's thick, off-white, and approximately 38% fat. Some of it goes to make 2% milk. A worker adjusts a valve to reinsert some into the skim milk. The resulting 2% milk is more watery than buttercream and is white. The less the fat content, the thinner and runnier the milk is. Back to the butter making. They put the buttercream in what's called a bulk tank, where mixers stir it to maintain the consistency. After pasteurizing and then aging the buttercream for 24 hours, workers prepare to transfer it into another machine called the churner. First, they clean the inside by filling it with water mixed with iodine. This removes any germs left behind by the previous batch. They spin the churner for about 5 minutes before rinsing it out. Next, they pour in 1,500 liters of buttercream, filling the churner about halfway. It's important to leave some room so that the air released in the churning process can escape through 2 vents in the churner. The churner spins at 28 rotations per minute, about the speed of a clothes dryer. This causes the buttercream's fat molecules to bunch together, releasing water and air. Every 5 minutes, a worker stops the churner and regulates the air vent on top. When he feels there's no more air escaping, he closes the valve and restarts the machine. After 30 minutes of churning, the fat molecules in the buttercream are creamy clumps known as popcorn butter. These clumps stay trapped in the churner, while the remaining liquid, called buttermilk, flows out a drain at the bottom. A vacuum pump system sends it through hoses to a nearby container. This draining process takes about 10 minutes and produces about 800 liters of buttermilk. This dairy uses the buttermilk to make ice cream. The popcorn butter, all 684 kilograms of it, has the same consistency as regular butter at room temperature. A worker now flavors it with 14 kilograms of salt. This dairy also makes unsalted butter. The worker closes the churner by sealing the glass window with a rubber ring and a metal collar. This keeps the internal air pressure roughly equal to what's outside the churner. Doing this ensures the churner works sufficiently. Another 30 minutes of churning and the fat molecules thicken even more and blend with the salt. What results is butter, which is yellow because of its natural vitamin A. Next, a worker scoops about 30 kilograms of butter into a milling machine. The mill moves the butter into the final production phase, where it'll be shaped and put into packages. This machine squeezes butter into an injector that's shaped like a block. The injector then deposits blocks of butter into open packages. The packaging paper has an aluminum outer coating. This prevents light from penetrating. Light can make the butter rancid. Each sheet is 26.5 centimeters long and 19 centimeters wide. Before the butter is inserted, a plastic former bends the paper into shape. This mill operates 4 days a week, churning out up to 33 blocks per minute. That's a fairly small quantity compared to some dairies. But this relatively slow pace allows greater quality control. To monitor the mill's precision, workers check every 15th block to ensure it weighs exactly 455 grams. The dairy then ships the butter to stores in refrigerated trucks.
Margarine is a non-dairy product. It's manufactured from animal or vegetable fats, such as oils. Flavorings, colorings, emulsifiers, preservatives, and vitamins are all added. And like butter, it contains approximately 80% fat and 16% water. Frequently used as a substitute for butter in baking and cooking. However, when you heat margarine, keep in mind that the water is going to separate from the fat much more readily than it does with butter. It doesn't equal butter's flavor either. Although there are a lot of things that have been added to margarine to enhance its flavor, there is still something to be said for the natural flavor of butter.
One of the things that makes cheese so impressive is that there's so many different types.
The better the milk, the better the cheese. Everybody believes that. You want cows that are happy.
It's a very labor-intensive physical job. That's part of the fun.
I'm always amazed when I just see hundreds of blocks of cheese just sitting there.
Anytime I tell anyone that I work in cheese, almost everyone's immediate reaction is, I love cheese. The entire process takes around 5 hours. So we pasteurize our milk, fill our vat, add culture. After that would be rennet addition, which will coagulate the milk. And you let it sit undisturbed so it sets and makes, similar to like a pudding, non-liquid form. And at that point, we cut and have curds and whey. It's great, it feels good. It's fun to make something. Since the day I started here, it's always been a really cool experience. Obviously, the fact that I love cheese and enjoy eating cheese made it really easy to get more in depth about this. I love being able to eat cheese every day, but I guess I could do that no matter what job I had. It's very fast-paced and enjoyable to keep herds and whey moving, keep them from settling, sticking back to each other. They want to stick together naturally. It is a lot of cheese for a couple of arms. It's a very labor-intensive physical job. That's part of the fun of it. It's not sitting behind a desk, you know, but it's a tangible activity. We're working with our hands. I think it continues to be interesting, and I love cheese. Absolutely love it. And from there, we are doing what's called cheddaring, and that's just a process of stacking and flipping the loaves of cheese to form proteins and let the cheese acidify. That's the big step. That's really what adds a lot of the traits of our flagship. They're fairly heavy, but you know, it's like anything else. You build the muscles with repetition, and it's a good workout. There's always more to learn. I work with an incredible staff, so it really is awesome. There is currently some cheese at my desk. It's all around all the time. It's in my refrigerator at home, at least 4 different types of features cheese. My sister sometimes gets overwhelmed with how much cheese is in my fridge. It's a great situation, I guess, a fun way to live. Well, it's a whole world. I mean, there's science, there's certainly a learning curve. In the beginning, people are like, wow, these things are really heavy, and then a couple months into working here, you're just moving stuff around, not even thinking about it. The flagship cheese is a delicious cheese, and that is because of a lot of different things. It's because of the passionate, involved people we have making it by hand every day. It's because of the recipe that we've developed over the years. The details of our recipe have an effect on what we're looking for, what we're trying to make. Final step is hooping. We put it into the hoop. It gets pressed into large blocks. The aging process is an integral part of our cheese-making process here. The aging process affects texture, moisture, flavor profile. Always have a piece of flagship in my fridge at home. Super creamy, melts really well. It has enough flavor that you know you're eating cheese. Always loved a grilled cheese sandwich, so it seemed like a natural fit to come and work at Beecher's. Probably one of the things that makes cheese so impressive is that there's so many different types. It depends so much on the person, the situation, everything.
One of the reasons I chose to buy a farm is I've always loved the outdoors. So I wanted a place where I could make cheese, but I would want to relax outside. That's how it all began. The better the milk, the better the cheese. Everybody believes that. You want cows that are happy. We use raw milk for our cheese for many reasons. When you eat a raw milk cheese, you do pick up more of the flavors of what the cows were eating, especially if they're allowed to eat outside. What makes it unique compared to other cheeses is the color. It has natural annatto, which is a natural coloring that gives it that bright color, makes it look in a way almost like something from outer space, like the moon. The more I got into cheese making and visiting farms, the more I fell in love with it. You know, one of the things I talk about is the art of possibility, that almost anything is possible. Just about every cheese made follows the basic steps. So how can this cheese be so different from another cheese? I think what humans can bring to making cheese is that sense of the moment. We do follow a strict formula, but your eyes and your hands and your senses will tell you that despite what you're supposed to do, maybe you stir it for an extra couple minutes because of the way it feels. You want the right texture. There are wonderful things that can be done with robots, but there's certain human emotions. They can affect food or anything else you do in a positive way. So if you really love what you're doing, you can't really program a robot to have that same kind of love and passion for it. It'll do what you program it to do, but it'll end there. Once you make the cheese, there's a long waiting period during the aging process. Aged cheeses, you go into it knowing that you may not see the fruits of your labor for 6 months to a year out. So you have to have a lot of patience with this cheese. One of the things I really enjoy is I have an excuse to build this below ground cave. When the cheeses are in the cave, they're still alive, and the cultures are still reacting. The cheeses can just sit and they develop this rind based on the different strains of bacteria in the air. We do our best to give it the right environment to thrive. You have to try and keep the air clean. What it picks up to create the molds adds another level to the flavor, and also the texture because it's a high humidity environment. That's basically a drying process that takes a long time. Staying there in a year lets it develop its truest potential. When I'm in the cave, I'm always amazed when I just see hundreds of wheels and blocks of cheese just sitting there. I'm sure there's several $100,000 worth of cheese down there. To me, they seem happy. When you complete a batch of cheese, whether it works out or not, you feel good because you've created it and done it. It's a wonderful feeling. The full circle value of doing everything from start to finish is my attempt at what one might call artistry. You know, when I taste cheese, there is a bit of magic. I'm just blown away by it. That feeling doesn't change. That's why I take so much pleasure in improving it. Maybe it's harder, but that's what we're trying to do. My hopes and dreams for the future are to enjoy life the best way I can. Working on a farm, they're long hours, there's no doubt about it. But if I wake up and I'm healthy and I could make cheese, it gives me reason for doing what I'm doing. The more I got into cheese making, the more I fell in love with it.
The fact that I love cheese and enjoy eating cheese made it really easy.
You go into it knowing that you may not see the fruits of your labor for a year out.
But it's fun to make something. It's great, it feels good.
When I taste cheese, there is a bit of magic. I'm just blown away by it.
Super creamy, melts really well. It really is awesome.
The reason I do this is because almost anything is possible.
I foresee continuing to make and eat great cheese for all my days.
Cheese is one of the oldest and most widely used foods known to man. Hundreds of natural cheeses are produced worldwide. Cheeses are a product of their environment. They pick up the flavors of the land. They pick up the flavors of the grass. They pick up the flavors of the animal. All of these things will process into the cheese. Cheese is made from a variety of animal milk, such as cow's milk, goat's milk, sheep's milk, ewe and camel milk. Milk proteins called caseins coagulate with rennin, which is an enzyme found in the stomach of ruminant animals such as cows and goats. You can also use a natural enzyme that is not made from animal sources as well, such as lemon juice. Certain cheeses may develop a natural rind or outer coating to it. This is usually a condition of the mixture of bacteria and air on the outside of the cheese. Now, normally when you say bacteria, that's a bad thing, but in the case of cheese, that's a very good thing. The higher the moisture content, the softer and more perishable the cheese will be. Fat content is less than 20%. It's considered low-fat cheese. At least 60% is considered double cream, and at least 72% is considered triple cream cheese, which is the richest of all the cheeses. It's very creamy and gushy. FDA rules require that raw milk cheeses must be aged more than 60 days at 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Cheeses are categorized a variety of different ways. This is just one way of categorizing the cheese. There are many different ways of looking at categorizations of this. This particular categorization is based on firmness. Fresh or unripened cheeses, soft cheeses, semi-soft cheeses, firm cheeses, hard cheeses, goat's milk cheese, and processed cheeses. Fresh or unripened cheeses consist of things such as cream cheese. It's a soft cow's milk cheese, smooth and mild in flavor. Mascarpone, which is soft cow's milk cheese, originally from Italy, extremely smooth and creamy. You might see this in a tiramisu. Mozzarella, which is a firm Italian cheese traditionally made with water buffalo's milk. Very mild white cheese that is stringy when melted. This is known as a pasta filata. It is a string cheese. Soft cheeses include things such as brie. Brie is a rind-ripened French cheese which is creamy and rich and contains at least 60% fat or more. Some bries can contain up to 75% fat, and this would be considered a triple cream brie cheese. Camembert, which is a rind-ripened French cheese, creamy and rich, contains 45% fat, and it's milder than brie. Taleggio, which is orange-colored washed rind cheese made from cow's milk, contains around 48% fat. Semi-soft cheeses such as Fontina has a dark gold, crusty rind and pale color, dense interior, and has a few small holes. It's very nutty and rich with a strong aroma that is often compared to, well, I call it foot. Gouda, which is just so much fun to say, Gouda. Gouda cheese is a Dutch cheese, and it's yellow with a few small holes, very small holes in it, and a mild buttery flavor. Typically, because this is not a rind cheese, a lot of soft cheeses will be dipped in wax to prevent any oxygen from getting into them, which could damage the cheese. Havarti, which is a cow's milk cheese made from Denmark, and it's very mild in flavor and creamy in texture. It looks a lot like a little Swiss and often is referred to as baby Swiss. Port Salut is a French cow's milk cheese with a smooth, rich, and savory flavor. Cabrales is a blue vein cheese made from a blend of raw cow's milk, ewe, and goat's milk. Gorgonzola, probably one of the most famous of all the blue cheeses, is an Italian blue veined cow's milk cheese, and it's creamier than other blues. It's really excellent for melting into a sauce. Roquefort, blue cheese of sheep's milk made from France. It's intensely pungent with a rich, salty flavor and a strong aroma. Stilton is the grandfather of all the blue cheeses. Blue vein cheeses of Great Britain. It's pungent, rich, and tangy, and combines with the best of the blues and the cheddars. Speaking of cheddars, let's talk about firm cheeses. Cheddar is a product of North America and Great Britain. Flavors range from mild to very sharp. Cheddar originated in England and Ireland and made its way over to the Americas in the late 1700s. Emmentaler is also considered the first Swiss. This is very mellow in flavor. It's got a rich, nutty flavor to it, and it's got the large holes, which is a byproduct of the gas bubbles that it gives off. When the gas gets trapped in there while the cheese is forming, these big holes will form in there. Gruyere, which is a cow's milk cheese made in the Swiss Alps, is moist and highly flavorful. Jarlsberg is a Swiss type of cheese from Norway with a mild and delicate sweet flavor. Manchego is a Spanish sheep's milk cheese. It has a buttery and slightly piquant flavor or spicy flavor. Monterey Jack is a cheddar-like cow's milk cheese from California. It's often flavored with peppers and herbs. This is a really excellent cheese for being able to combine other items with. It's fairly mild in flavor, and it accepts different kinds of flavors to be able to add into it. Provolone is a cow's milk cheese of southern Italy, commonly used for melting in pizza and pasta dishes. Provolone Dolce is aged 2 months. Provolone Picante is aged up to 6 months. Hard cheeses are thought to be some of the first cheeses that were made for long-term storage. Asiago cheese is sharp and nutty with a cheddar-like flavor. It's aged around 1 year. Pecorino Romano is a goat's milk cheese with brittle and sharper than other cheeses and is often grated. It has a sheepy tang to it. Grana Padano, which is a crumbly Italian cheese produced in the Italy's Po Valley. It's made from unpasteurized cow's milk in a giant copper cauldron and then aged for a minimum of 9 months. And Parmigiano Reggiano, the king of cheeses, made exclusively in the Parma region of Italy. It has a rich and spicy and sharp flavor. This is the cheese that is considered the grandfather of all cheeses in Italy. It was often used in Roman times to feed the Roman centurions, and that and things such as bread and prosciutto. Goat and sheep milk cheeses include things such as chèvre. It's French for goat, refers to small, soft, creamy cheeses. This is produced in a variety of different shapes, including the shapes you can see on the screen. They're often coated with ash or herbs and seasonings. They're served both fresh and aged. You can see the difference in the fresh cheeses. Just look at the one in the middle, which has a nice white, almost chalky texture to it, versus the one in the bottom right that has that center of that white chalky texture. The outside ring of that is a nice creaminess. This is what happens to cheese over age, over time, where the creaminess forms into this cheese and it changes the texture and the flavor of it. Feta is probably one of the most well-known of the sheep's milk cheeses. It's a semi-soft cheese made from sheep's or goat's milk. It has a white flaky cheese that is stored in a brine of salt water. Processed cheeses. There are several different kinds of processed cheeses. We're familiar with the most common form, the American cheese, which we'll talk about in a moment. But there are grades of processing which will give you different textures of cheese. Pasteurized processed cheese is made from a combination of aged and green cheeses or unaged cheeses, mixed with emulsifiers and flavorings, pasteurized and poured into molds. Processed cheese food contains less natural cheeses and is often has vegetable oils and milk solids added to it. An imitation cheese is manufactured with dairy byproducts and soy products, mixed with emulsifiers, colorings, and flavoring agents and enzymes. Because of its high protein content, cheese can melt into a tough, stringy mass. Heating it can cause cheese to curdle or separate. So we want to use low temperatures and short cooking times. Do not ever boil cheese because it will completely wreck the texture of it. Grate cheese before stirring it into warm sauces or soups. Keep it warm in a bain-marie or double boiler on low heat. So let's talk about the summaries and some of our takeaways for today. Milk and milk products are determined by the amount of milk fat. The higher the fat, the richer the milk or cream. Homogenization is a process of taking large globules of milk fat and breaking them down so they disperse throughout the liquid evenly. Butter becomes either salted or unsalted, but most professional chefs use unsalted so they can better control the amount of salt in the dish. Cheese. From creamy to gushy and to hard to crystalline cheese, it's a power pack of fats, proteins, and nutrients. Some of the first, best, and most filling of foods. Cheese comes in a variety of different tastes for every taste that you might have, and is a great accompaniment to many dishes, and is even great on its own.